Welcome to episode 16 of Wellness Wednesday's audio series. I'm Nissrine, registered holistic nutritionist, mindful nutrition and wellness coach for female entrepreneurs who are looking to prioritize their health and well-being without fad diets and wellness trends. I created this series to bring a fresh perspective to nutrition and wellness, one that is centered on and led by you. There is a plethora of information out there, and it can be really hard to know what to do and eat to feel good in your body. It's easy to get caught up in fad diets and wellness trends, and often questioning, doubting, and second guessing your decisions when it comes to the way you nourish and care for yourself. But I wholeheartedly believe that reconnecting with your own innate wisdom to know what your body needs to thrive is the first step to a life-changing transformation and true lasting wellness. And that progress is made by taking small steps mindfully, intentionally, and consistently. As a continuation of last week's conversation on interoceptive awareness and how you can strengthen it to reconnect with your innate wisdom and start listening to your body, today's episode is all about the hunger scale. If you've ever struggled to get in touch with your hunger and satiety cues, or to recognize the differences between physical, biological hunger and psychological triggers of hunger, then the hunger scale is a great tool for you to work with. The idea behind it is that hunger and satiety exist on a spectrum where the middle point is neither hungry nor full. This usually happens when you've met all of your energy needs. Then you have hunger to one side and fullness to the other to varying degrees. So if you look at the scale of 1 to 10, 1 would be starving, so feeling weak, no energy, and a hollow, empty feeling in your stomach. You may even feel sick to your stomach, have a headache and nausea at this point because you're over hungry. And you may not even recognize this as hunger. You may just feel like you're off and you're not feeling well. On the opposite side of the scale at 10, you would also be sick to your stomach and nauseated, but from overeating this time. So eating past the point of satiety, past the point of fullness, past the point of discomfort. Right? Now, the ideal place to be is somewhere between a 4 and 7 on the scale. So at 6 or 7, you're satiated, you're satisfied, you're full, but you're feeling comfortable. At 5, you're still thinking about food, you're salivating at the mouth, your salivary enzymes are starting to activate, even without the sight or smell of food, but even more so with the sight or smell of food. And at 4, this is where you're beginning to feel the physical sensations of hunger. Maybe you're starting to hear the sounds of hunger, like you can hear your stomach growling. Just to be clear though, the digestive tract gurgles all the time as it moves food and liquid, air and gas along the tract, from the mouth to the anus, in a process that's called peristalsis. But the gurgling gets louder when the stomach is empty because there's no food in there and you're hearing the sound of the air and gas moving around. So that said, gurgling doesn't always mean hunger. And you can sometimes hear your stomach gurgling as it digests the food you just ate. However, when the gurgling sounds get louder and more persistent, like they don't go away, they just keep going and going, and it's been more than 3 or 4 hours since you last ate, it's probably a good time to check in with your hunger levels. So take a pause and ask yourself, am I hungry, when you hear your stomach gurgling? But if you're someone who struggles to recognize the signs of hunger in your body, I would take it a step further and pause to check in with your hunger at regular intervals throughout the day. Now, connecting to your hunger and satiety may not feel intuitive at first. especially if you've spent a lot of time dieting, ignoring or silencing your hunger cues, or you're someone who tends to skip meals or eat on autopilot because you forget to eat, quote unquote, when you're too busy, you don't think about it, and then you eat really without much consideration for your hunger. You just kind of, when it's time to eat, you eat. Things like that. You may find it difficult to identify fullness or differentiate between physical and psychological hunger at first. And that's okay. There's always a learning curve when you're doing something new. Just keep practicing until it becomes second nature. But looking back at the hunger scale now, you're checking in with yourself to see if you're hungry, right? At regular intervals. When is the ideal time to eat? Like I said before, the ideal time to start eating would be around 4 or 5 on the scale, when you're starting to think about food, you're salivating, and your stomach is slightly gurgling, right? This is likely a sign that your body needs food and that your digestive enzymes are active. As I said before though, gurgling doesn't automatically mean hunger, but chances are if the gurgling is getting louder and more persistent, and 3 to 4 hours have passed since your last meal, it could be a good indication that it's time to eat. A 4 or 5 on the hunger scale is also a comfortable level of hunger. You're not ravenous, your blood sugar is still relatively stable, and you're able to make rational and intentional choices, right? You're able to think clearly and to make the right choices for your body in that moment. If you wait too long to eat, so you've reached a level, 3, 2, or even 1 on the hunger scale, everything starts to look and sound appealing, because by that time, once you've reached kind of the lower levels of the hunger scale at 3, 2, or 1, you're distracted, you're irritable, you're low energy, maybe you feel dizzy, you're completely running on empty, as I mentioned before, you're feeling weak without any energy at all, and you can't really think clearly, right? Everything starts to look appealing just to fill that hunger gap, right? Even the foods you don't enjoy become viable options to fuel your tank. So you may find yourself also shoveling food into your mouth faster than you can chew it. That's because extreme hunger drives us into survival mode, and we're more likely to overeat when that happens, right? Because when we finally do see food, we're just like, we can't wait to get it in our bodies, right? Now, on the flip side, how do you know when you should stop eating? So again, if you're struggling with your sort of fullness cues, with your satiety cues, and you don't know, think about the hunger scale again. And once you've reached 6 or 7 on the hunger scale, that's probably a good indication that it's time to stop eating. So at 6, you're full and you're satisfied, right? At 7, you're pretty full, but you're still comfortable. And basically, satiety is reached when your stomach expands slightly and no longer feels empty, right? And when your hormones have had time to signal to your brain that you're nourished. This typically happens, I'd say, about 20 minutes into your meal, which is why it's important to fully engage your senses and take your time eating and chewing your food properly, to give yourself the time and space to actually digest what you're eating, and to give your body the time to signal the brain that you've received nourishment and you're feeling good. Now, continuing to eat when you're full, so when you're past the 7 on that hunger scale. So imagine 6 being satiety, like I said before, 7 is full but still comfortable. If you go past that, it can be problematic, because not only will it leave you feeling bloated, uncomfortable, and sluggish. Think about the last time you went out to a really good restaurant and you ordered something you really loved and you couldn't stop eating it even though you were full, and then you really wanted dessert, so you had it. And maybe you also dipped into the appetizers before your meal arrived, so you're really feeling full and uncomfortable and sluggish at this point. And of course, it's okay for that to happen once in a while. And sometimes when we go out and we want to be sort of free to eat whatever we want and socialize and not miss out on dessert, it's totally okay. But if this is something that you do regularly, it begins to affect your digestion poorly. And some research even indicates that it might cause your blood sugar to surge, which is never really ideal. All right? So this is why it's important, if you're someone who struggles to really listen to their body when it comes to when to start eating, when to stop eating, who struggles to really understand your hunger and differentiate it, sort of that physical, biological sensation of hunger from the non-physical, so this sort of the psychological triggers of hunger. If you're someone who has a hard time separating the two and you don't really know when you're hungry and when you're full, and you don't know how it feels in your body, the hunger scale is actually a really great place to start. And you'll want to begin using it with one meal a day, right? You don't want to try this for all meals until you've had a chance to practice and feel comfortable doing it for one meal a day. You don't want this to be a stressful exercise, okay? Now, before you start eating, take a minute to assess how hungry you are. If you're not sure what number you're at, start by ruling out where you are not, right? Remember, it's not important, or even necessary for you to be able to pinpoint the exact spot on the scale, right? This is not like an exact science or an exercise in a multiple choice exercise where there's only one answer. The scale is just a tool to help you tune in to the physical signs of hunger. So aim for a range to start with and feel the physical sensations associated with that range. So if you say to yourself, okay, right now I'm about, a 4 or a 5, right? Feel the sensations that are associated with that 4 or 5, right? And become familiar with them. It may be helpful to even make note of this in your reflection journal, right? I talk about the reflection journal a lot on this audio series because it's something I believe everyone should have, not just for hunger and satiety, but for so many different things. But start by making note of these sensations by rating your hunger and listing the physical sensations that you're feeling with that point on the hunger scale. And then as you're eating, pause and check in with yourself. When you start eating, halfway through your meal, and then again at the end. Feel the physical sensation in your body as sort of hunger dissipates and satiety begins to take over. And use the scale to gauge how you feel. Okay, so you started at a 4 or 5, but how does your body feel now? Where are you at the halfway point? Are you at a 6? Are you still kind of halfway between a 5 and a 6? You're not quite satiated yet? Or are you at a 7? Are you full but comfortable? Right? Once you start eating, you should enter, I think, what I would call the neutrality zone within a few minutes, and satiety about 20 minutes in to your meal, which is why it's important to give yourself enough time to eat your meal and to chew your food properly, right? Taking time to slow down, chew, and savor each bite is very helpful here and will help you connect with your hunger and satiety a lot more easily, okay? And like I've mentioned already a couple of times, generally speaking, you want to keep eating until you reach a 6 or 7 on the scale so that you're comfortable, you're well nourished, and then you stop, okay? Now, if you find yourself regularly reaching for food when you're at 6 and above on the hunger scale, so when you're already satiated and full and comfortable, but then you reach for food anyway, or you frequently eat to the point of discomfort and pain, stop and reflect on some of the reasons that may be triggering you to do this. So some journal prompts for overeating reflection, let's say, okay? I'm just going to list some off for you, and you can use these in your reflection journal the next time you have one of these situations come up. So think about your eating environment. Is your eating environment too stressful or distracting? Right? Are you eating at your desk while you're working? Are you eating in an environment that stresses you out? Think about that, because that can have an impact on your ability to tune into your body. Think about, your eating habits in general. Have you been restricting your intake of food or certain food groups? Because what happens often is that when you do restrict and you limit and you avoid, there comes a time when you just then lose control around certain foods. Or is it that you have been sort of ignoring your hunger, silencing it all day, either because you're dieting, you're eating within a time restricted window, or maybe you're just running on autopilot and you're too busy to think about eating, and so you don't hear your hunger, or you silence it purposely, and then you get to a point in the day where you're just ravenous and you're ready to eat everything, and then you overeat, because you're more likely to overeat when you've been silencing or ignoring your hunger throughout the day. Also think about whether or not you're suffering from anxiety or depression or other imbalances that actually may alter your appetite, make you less hungry throughout a period of time, and then suddenly it catches up with you and you're ravenous. Have you been sleeping well, right? That's a really important link that most people don't correlate with their eating habits, but it's really important. So if you don't sleep well, your hunger hormones begin to be imbalanced, right? You'll start to feel more hungry. You'll start to crave more carbohydrate, sugar-rich foods, and that'll impact your choices throughout the day as well, and how much you're eating, and so on and so forth. And then think about whether or not you're balancing your meals throughout the day. So when you're eating, what are you eating? Are you eating well-balanced meals? Are you getting all of your macronutrients, your complex carbohydrates with plenty of fiber? Are you getting healthy fats and good quality proteins that are, leaving you feeling nourished and satiated? Because if you don't balance your meals throughout the day, you're undernourishing your body, and what's going to happen is you're going to get to a point where your body is just going to want more nourishment, want more food, because it doesn't feel nourished enough, right? So think about these things, and because that might drive you to overeat at the end of a day, for example, which is one of the most common complaints that I hear, is that they get to, my clients get to dinner time, and then they're famished, they're ravenous, and just want to eat everything. And like I mentioned before, are you skipping meals? So we talked about before the restricting your intake, the dieting, the eating on autopilot. And part of that is also skipping meals, whether it be because you're on a diet or because you're just not paying attention and you're too busy and you forget to have lunch, or you don't actually consciously, intentionally stop and take a pause to ask yourself if you're hungry enough to eat lunch, and you just power through your day, and before you know it, you're famished and you're more likely to overeat at the next meal. All right, now these are some great journal prompts that I encourage you to reflect on in your reflection journal. So if you don't already have a reflection journal, now would be a really, really good time to start it. All right, on that note, I want to thank you for tuning in, and I want to remind you that if you're looking for support with your nutrition and self-care and making it a priority, you can book a complimentary wellness consultation with me to chat about your goals and how to get you there. At the very least, we'll have a nice chat and you'll get some clarity about the wellness journey ahead of you. Last but not least, though, if you'd like to be a part of my pilot program entitled Reawaken Your Innate Food Wisdom, which is a self-paced, mindful nutrition program with 4 weeks of group support to help you prioritize your nutrition and wellness without fad diets and trends, then get on my mailing list to get an exclusive invitation once I'm ready to launch it. It will be a journey to learning more about your body and what it needs to thrive. It's a mindful approach to nutrition that will improve your relationship with food, and a wellness education program that will guide you for life so that your nutrition and self-care will always be a priority. To get on my mailing list, all you have to do is subscribe to this audio series or download my simple 5-step framework to nourishing meals in minutes, and you'll be the first to know when the pilot program is ready for testing. I'm going to pop all the relevant links in the notes below, so go ahead, click on and subscribe to the audio series or download that free guide to get on the list. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share with a friend, and be sure to tune in next week for another episode of Wellness Wednesday's audio series, where I share a short audio clip each week to inspire you to reconnect with yourself on a deeper level so you can start nourishing and caring for yourself more mindfully and intentionally. Until next week, stay healthy, happy, and safe.